Hi, welcome to week 3 of our study of the 41 Marzano traits of an effective teacher, covered in Becoming a Reflective Teacher, the book that Marzano Publishing has produced that, again, is not required for your class, but I'll be using examples from that intensively today. So the trait that we're working on today is element 36, which is what do I typically do to understand student interests and backgrounds, which should sound very similar to you in terms of its comparison to one of last week's, which was number 31, talking about incorporating student interest into learning of content. So this week I'm going to try to focus on just some really specific examples of those ways that you can learn about student interests and their background. So again, they mostly come from the Becoming a Reflective Teacher text, but the teacher evidence and student evidence is still listed on your Marzano Padlet wall. So for trait number 36 again. So some of the teacher evidence for this particular trait involves just the teacher having side discussions with students about their interests, which you definitely see in most classrooms where the relationships between student and teacher are very strong and where classroom management problems are minimal because students feel, in terms of evidence, students describe the teacher as someone who's actually interested in their interests and their background. The teacher will have those discussions about topics that students are interested in, not just dominating conversation with topics that they themselves are interested in as the teacher, although that's important also to make sure that the students know you as a person and not just as a teacher. And the students respond when that teacher demonstrates an understanding of their interest and background. So they're responsive, and even though they may be tentative at first and they're buying into your sudden interest in popular music and movies, they do respond by becoming encouraged by your level of interest and then giving back to you as much as you're giving to them. One other piece of teacher evidence that is listed is that the teacher does build student interests into lessons, which we discussed in one of the previous elements, and it is still just as important as it is important now as it was then in that element, that you do incorporate those student interests into your lessons, because then they know you were really listening when they were talking to you. And when asked, as another piece of student evidence, when asked, students say they feel accepted in your space, regardless of their backgrounds or their interests or their orientation to different things, their worldviews. They do feel accepted in your space. So those are things that students will show you as evidence of the fact that you are learning about their interests and backgrounds. So some of the very specific ideas that are brought forth in the Marzano text have to do with using background surveys, which I think you're probably pretty familiar with in terms of asking questions of students to get to know them. Most of you do that informally, but they provide you with some question ideas within the text, which I'm sure if you Googled student background surveys, you would find the same information. But examples of, do you take lessons of any kind? What are your favorite books? What are your favorite movies? What kind of things do you do on vacation or over the summer? Something interesting that happened with my son was that he's in second grade this year, and his teacher asked them within the first week of school to identify it was kind of like a quiz. They had to identify some different things they did over the summer. Now, as a teacher, I kind of wondered, I guess I assume I know her ulterior motive for asking some of these things, to find out what types of experiences these children are exposed to when they're not in school. So do they have any extracurricular activities, or do they have the resources to participate in things and go places? So I don't know whether it was good or bad, but she asked 4 questions, something like, how many of you were on a plane in the past year? How many of you how many of you went to Kings Island? I'm not even sure what the other 2 questions were specifically, but my little guy, he had done all 4 things. That's just something that, my husband kind of continually emphasizes. He says, we pay for the memories and the experiences more than we do the stuff. That's what's more important, the memories that they'll have. So he won some book, as a prize, but I kind of thought, I think the teacher probably learned a lot from the students by asking those questions, but I also hope that it didn't set up my little one for, kind of an awkward scenario because he has access to those resources and maybe not all students do. So you do, I think, have to be careful in some of the questions you ask and make sure that maybe a prize isn't associated with them. I think that was probably the lesson that I learned from him coming home, because a student did make fun of him for something completely unrelated after he won that book for having done all 4 things. So maybe just poor judgment, but it's just one of those things you learn from, I think, as a teacher. So background surveys are great. Those questions usually have another extra set of meaning behind them than you might even realize, or might even realize now, or might have even realized when you were younger and being asked those questions. You can go ahead and hold individual student-teacher conferences to learn more specifically about students. I would think if you had a smaller class size or a lower caseload, if you were a special education teacher. So I think that that's something that, time can certainly make difficult or make challenging to do. It's good, simple things that you can do, such as reading the school newspaper or bulletin, that will really make a difference for you in terms of building relationships. Kids get excited when they know that you know that they read the most pages in books this year, or they were the star player in an activity over the weekend. So make sure you're reading those and looking for names of your students. You can just do informal class interviews and just sort of come up with a topic. And if you have, 10 minutes of downtime, maybe teach them a procedure for, all right, we're going to have, talk time with Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, and make sure that they know, everybody will have a chance to be heard. And then you can ask some more detailed questions at that point to find out what their current interests are. Honestly, sometimes it's more so about listening to them when they're on the playground, or watching some shows that they're into, so the same characters, and you understand the storylines of some of their Disney Channel favorites. Maybe even just wandering through the Toys R Us, and looking at some of the items that are available, so what the characters and areas of interest are of those students. And then you can maybe even use some video clips of things in class to show that you have been, investigating their culture. There are some more specific ideas they give that I think you would need to look up to implement in a classroom, but they talk about creating autobiographical metaphors, or doing 6-word autobiographies. So creating an opportunity for students to represent themselves and their lives in very few words, or in a specific structure, and then having them share those with the class and use that as a jumping off point for conversation. So then I guess you could incorporate some of your language arts goals into your background findings. So additionally, they could be collecting quotes to share about their interests and areas of their talents. And I will tell you that I used that also with students that were in expulsion school when I was teaching them for Delaware County. And when they were creating their book that was connected to the Freedom Writer's Diary, they had to develop all the quotes that headed up each section of the book. So in hearing their quotes and seeing their quotes that they were interested in, I did learn about their backgrounds, and maybe not specifically, but indirectly, about some of the things that maybe pained them or that they were proud of in their lives. So then I could be more careful or more joyful with them if I had that information. One other piece of information that is a specific recommendation, yet a word of caution from me, is recognizing students for their achievements in the class. And I know it's easier. It's easy to find things to recognize in students when they're achieving in your class, and it's easy to find things to celebrate with students when they share those with you all of the time. There are kids that come into the classroom and say, oh, look what I did. You know what I did last night? Here's what I did. But there are other students who might not either have something to share that they recognize as an achievement. They might not be involved outside of your classroom in opportunities or activities that would provide those achievement levels that you expect kids to come in and tell you about. So you need to think very, very carefully about when you are asking students for what things went well for them, or if they've done anything well lately. Please notice those kids that don't come in sharing those items with you, or children who you suspect maybe actually are achieving but just aren't openly sharing because they aren't comfortable doing so. So you just need to make sure that you give everyone sort of an equitable opportunity to do that, or otherwise you end up maybe doing more harm than good in your recognition of student achievements. And some ideas that you might want them to talk about might not even be the happiest things sometimes, but they might just be milestones in their lives or in their families. Changes in job status, changes in caregiver status, their pets, conversations about their pets, vacations, places that they've gone when they've maybe volunteered or done community service. Sometimes that actually takes place in different communities. And then, of course, some of those obvious ones that have to do with social, academic, and athletic achievements or artistic achievements within the school community. So again, this particular element works in tandem with the previous element where you're working to incorporate student interest into your content and make things relevant for students. So I encourage you to try out some of these techniques this week as one of your goal setting activities if you choose to work on element number 36. Thank you.